Good Saturday to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our off-season discussion video for January 6th, 2024. Finally into 2024, first video of the new year, and let's get right on with it. Have a lot to talk about today, but first I do want to start off with a look of the global tropics because we don't really talk about that often. Of course, we do have hurricanes in the Atlantic, and that's what we do tend to focus on, and even the Eastern Pacific, and sometimes the Western Pacific too. But there's also activity that does happen in the Southern Hemisphere, and there is not a lot of activity happening right now globally. We are getting into it with the Southern Hemisphere season. It is their kind of time of year right now, just like particularly around May, June, July, August, September is usually our time here in the Northern Hemisphere. But they're not really in their peak yet, but they do still have activity. This is in this area 4S in the Southern Indian Ocean. And there was also a tropical storm that did form near Madagascar. I think its name was Alvaro. Did come across Madagascar and bring some impacts several days ago, but that is gone now, luckily. And for now, we are left with a blank, I guess, a blank kind of canvas, I guess, if you will. New year, obviously, and nothing going on right now, but definitely going to change soon. I do want to start off with the SOI though, in terms of climate factors, as we usually look at in these sort of off-season videos. SOI is very interesting, and I do want to mention that because the December value is out for the monthly average of the SOI, and we only averaged at negative 3.78. And if you've been with me for a while, you know I like to mention the value marker that we tend to look at with the SOI is negative 7, because in the negative territory, that is atmospherically is when the SOI is more in correlation with El Nino, and we're not matching that marker right now, even though oceanically we are in a strong El Nino. And it's very interesting. And even the SOI, going back to daily values, this graph here that I'm showing is kind of a graphic, a mapping of the daily values average into the 30-day, and the average of the 30-day so far still remains above that negative 7 mark, still in the negative territory. So there's still some sort of atmospheric response there, but especially since December, the mean has generally gone up. So the atmosphere is slowly responding. We're only at negative 4.76 right now, and even the 90-day average of the SOI, which measures over 3 months, so that would be a tri-monthly period, is still only at negative 6, which is above negative 7. So very interesting things indeed, and certainly something to watch going forward. Sea surface temperature anomalies. Despite the SOI, we still have the El Nino going strong in the Pacific and the Atlantic, which is warm too. And we're actually going to talk about this and the El Nino a lot, because it is the beginning of the month, and you do know at the beginning of the month, climate models do release new forecasts, and that's what we do have in store for today. And it is very interesting. One, of course, being that we have this strong El Nino right now, but a lot of models are pretty confident that this will erode with time and weaken. Some more aggressive on that than others, but most of the consensus is this will eventually weaken, and we'll start to see a bunch of these red and orange anomalies be replaced with a bunch of these more neutral and even cold anomalies. And that is something very interesting, especially for hurricane season, given the Atlantic is very warm now. And hint, the climate models do hint that this will not really go away, especially as we head into the spring. And I'll show you that right now here. You can even take a look at the Nino 3.4 index now. We did peak over the last few days. Just before the new year, we reached 2.2 degrees Celsius in the Nino 3.4 region. If you're wondering what that is, basically that's the region we look at most when it comes to sea surface temperature anomalies for measuring El Nino and La Nina. And those been dropping off rapidly. We're now below 2.1 Celsius, and we're reaching the 2 degrees Celsius line, and we'll probably drop below that within the next few days to come. Meanwhile, on the Atlantic side, we've been going up, and we've been up above 1 degree Celsius basically for almost the entire time since since last year. And if you remember, especially last year, we were well above 1 degree Celsius. This is mid-October. We were very warm. We're not as warm as then, but bottom line, even since October last year, we were well above zero point 0.8 degrees Celsius above normal, and that, no matter what, is still very warm by Atlantic standards. And especially since December, we have seen a huge uptrend in the sea surface temperature anomalies out in the Atlantic. In the MDR specifically, that's the most specific part of the Atlantic that we tend to look at when it comes to sea surface temperature anomalies. And remember, when I did say that they don't seem like they'll go away anytime soon, well, Adrian Liners here on Twitter mentioned this yesterday. There's surely plenty of winter for things to change, but a quick look at the main development region in sea surface temperature anomalies in January are on fire, and with the ongoing negative NAO, they should get even warmer. And he does mention this, showing the sea surface temperature anomaly plots very warm indeed across both the NOAA Coral Reef Watch. He has 2 maps, I think. Yeah, NOAA Coral Reef Watch and the OISST. And he does mention the negative NAO as well, which is the North Atlantic Oscillation. So that means lower pressures across the subtropics, more active subtropical jet stream, meaning reduced trade winds across the Atlantic. We won't be having screaming trade winds, and in return, the Atlantic will warm up. And the climate models definitely are onto this. This is the CANCIPS released as of January. This is the January run from the CANCIPS. And notice a few things. One, of course, we did mention that La Nina, and models, again, this latest model run cycle, they all seem to be pretty aggressive on the chance that La Nina will come in. And then take a look at this signal in the Atlantic too. That's a classic look to the Atlantic. And I know it's only January, but that is a classic look. Just take a look at this, kind of this horseshoe shape, as we call it, a very strong positive AMO signature. The Atlantic basically meaning it's well above normal, and it also has the configuration for that as well that we typically see in very active hurricane seasons, and also these anomalies too. Even the climate model, such as the CANCIPS, all the way going out to September, October, August through October of this season, picking up anomalies, which, at least judging by this graphic, seems to be high as 1 degree Celsius here in the Atlantic this far out. That is pretty insane if you ask me. And the CFS is not that different too. Same look. Colder Pacific, this cold tongue representing some sort of transition to a cooler ENSO, even La Nina possible. Deep tropics also very warm. Take a look at these anomalies too. Caribbean very warm, even off the coast of Africa as well. Anomalies reaching as high as 0.5, even 1 degree Celsius above normal on the CFS as well. And that's going as well out to August, September, October of this year. And the CFS did actually update this month to show October as well. So this is the first run that we're getting, showing all 3 peak months of the season together. And this is definitely an active look too. And Andy Hazelton did take to Twitter as well from yesterday as well with the European seasonal, and they're showing the same thing too. Even with the European, they do show, wait for it to load, there we go, European from where it is now in December, notice this downtrend, down all the way to what seems to be neutral. And he does mention, but not quite as fast as the other models, that the European goes. And I will say the European is notorious, the European seasonal at least, is notorious for having some sort of warm bias with what it does show in terms of ENSO. They do sometimes tend to lean towards El Nino a little bit more, especially when it comes to these transition events from El Nino to La Nina. But nonetheless, it still shows a decline, and a pretty rapid one, and a consistent one in the very least between now and into the early summer months. We're not quite at the peak months yet with the European, so there's also still time for this to change too. Heck, we're still even in January. But generally they do show a decrease as well. Very interestingly enough, precipitation wise too, this is the precipitation anomalies. Very active look across the deep tropics. Lots of precipitation in the Caribbean and across the MDR too, going out to July of 24. So that would at least suggest we'll probably have some sort of active African monsoon pattern in place, already a positive for the season, and even most importantly, sea surface temperature anomalies, even the European too, suggesting some sort of colder look developing at least in the eastern Pacific towards the early summer months before the peak. And most importantly, the sea surface temperature anomalies in the Atlantic. Basically, we'll go back to the CANCIPs here. They're basically showing the same thing, and it is honestly alarming. And I will remain to say this: it is honestly alarming whenever we do see all the climate models, even though it is as far out as it is right now in January. The fact that they're all converging, that's the way we like to look at model convergence. The fact that they're all agreeing and converging on this idea that we'll probably see transition to cooler ENSO, maybe even La Nina, and the fact as well of a very, very warm and very classic signature to the Atlantic sea surface temperature profile. That is definitely something to take into consideration and something we'll definitely watch over the next coming months. But really quickly, I do want to shift away from tropics because there is some winter weather going on, winter storm warnings in effect for a bunch of the Northeast right now, some sort of winter weather system moving through. And this will bring quite a bit of decent snow. Some places could get up to over a foot of snow, but unfortunately, more looking closer towards inland areas. So if you're in, for instance, New York City or Philly and you're a snow lover, I'm feeling your pain. I really am. But most of the weather does seem to be more of a inland, just inland of the coast oriented event. And there will also be a sharp gradient too of who will see close to no snow to sometimes even going just a few miles inland and you're already seeing totals over half a foot half a foot of snow. Very unfortunate thing if you're along the coast, but we've already dealt with it for the last few winters. So what is new? But really quickly, just want to take a look at the GFS, and I'm just going to show you here, going out to 12 hours. This is around 7 o'clock tonight is when this storm starts to move in. The low pressure off the coast, but it's positioned in a way, and this is why the low pressure, especially when it comes to these winter weather systems, it's always important where the low pressure is centered, because that really determines how much the cold air will be able to get down into a certain place. And in this case, the low pressure is very close to the coast of Long Island, and because of that, cold air is being pulled in down close to the coast, but not far enough that it could reach places such as New York City. Hence, places like New York City get in mostly on the rain action, while places like Boston, which are further up north, this is by 24 hours, so this is around this time tomorrow, Boston is seeing heavy snow total amounts. In New York City, still seeing mostly rain. But then I did see models such as the GFS, and especially some of the mesoscale models, which I don't want to take too much time on, so I'm not going to look at it, but they've been showing that we could potentially see, once we do see this storm move out towards the east, cold air from the north could kind of wrap around behind it, and we could see a back end thump band, as people are calling it, that could potentially bring some sort of snow to places that didn't see it the first time around. But bottom line, GFS kind of keeps this low close enough to the coast that rain stays on the coast, but just inland people do get heavy wet snow. And then further inland than that, like inland Connecticut or maybe inland Massachusetts or inland upstate New York, do get some areas where snow totals are up to potentially over a foot of snow. So if you're in those areas, I guess you could consider yourself lucky. And I'll even show it here with the 2-meter air temperature. Look at this. It is cold right now, and it is especially cold below 32 degrees. That's what this blue line represents in inland areas of the coast, of inland areas of the Northeast right now. And so they have enough cold air on the surface in order for there to be snow. But look at places, especially the New York City metro and Long Island, where we stay rain most of the time. You notice that we never drop below or at 32 degrees. And once this low pressure moves in, it kind of draws in warm air from the south up north into the coastal areas. So because of that, there's not enough cold air by the coast to really work with. Well, as opposed to inland, where we'll see the higher snow totals. Look at these temperature readings: 27, 28 degrees over northern Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, upstate New York, 28. Even southern upstate New York, right close to that gradient, where the snow totals really begin to increase, 30 degrees, and most of Connecticut at or below freezing. And so that's where they will see more snow. But by the time this does come in, and then you do notice once the storm does wrap around towards the back, you do notice places closer to the coast, we do see more colder temperatures closer towards the surface. And because of that, a lot of models are beginning to respond. So maybe we could see some more snow towards the back end of this as this moves away and begins to taper off. So maybe if you are along the coast and you are hoping for snow, maybe we'll get some from then. Other than that, kind of looking towards the future, very active winter pattern is actually beginning to set up along the East Coast. I believe around next week, big low pressure will move in, kind of cut inland, and bring snow more or less towards upstate, much further inland parts of the United States. Even places that are getting snow now will probably get rain with this system mid next week. And this could also, and from what I've seen, it could be a high wind situation as well. So maybe if it does prompt a video, I'll do that sometime this week. And then looking ahead after that, a string of active systems will kind of trek across the east. Although it really comes down to, just like with hurricanes, you could say, really comes down to where the low pressure tracks into who's going to see snow, who's going to see rain, how much cold air comes down. That's really what it comes down to with these systems. Same thing as hurricane forecasting. Where will the center make landfall? That determines who will see the highest wind gusts, who will see the highest surge, and even how strong the low pressure is. And same thing with hurricanes, how strong it is, which determines the wind damage and also the storm surge as well. So really, if you really put it together, they're all in one in the same when it comes to forecasting. It's all about that. And even especially with snowstorms, even too with landfalls, sometimes it's not best to look at the snow totals and forecasting snow up until usually a day or two before the event. And same thing with hurricanes, that sometimes we won't get an official or a more certain look on where exactly it will make landfall till a day or two before it does so. Especially something to learn from the last few seasons. We've definitely learned that lesson for sure. But longer range, when it comes to the season, La Nina chances are increasing for the 2024 season. That's something I'll definitely say for sure, or at least the picture is getting more certain that does seems to be the case. In the Atlantic, whether or not it does stay as warm as it does really depends. But if the climate models are all agreeing this far out that it could, and keep in mind, I'm saying that knowing that these climate models are indeed getting better as time goes on. They are definitely better for sure, especially a model like the CanSIPs, definitely miles better than it was from 2020. That I'll say for sure. So as a whole, there's definitely some sort of credit, or I could say there's definitely some sort of merit to what these models are saying. So definitely something to be interested in and something to keep an eye on. Though, of course, it is still only January, and things could definitely change between now till the season. Still more than 100 days away from the season as well. So there's definitely a lot of time for things to change. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up. If you like what you saw, I always encourage you, like, subscribe, share with family and friends to get a community going. Stay safe. Stay indoors, especially if you're going to get a lot of snow this weekend in the Northeast. I envy you, but I also hope you stay safe. Don't go outdoors unless necessary, but I'm pretty sure most of you know that by now. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you next weekend.